Interesting video we're uploading today, which is going to be a fly on the wall Dolby Atmos mastering session. Now we're working with a guy called Urban Dub, who is part of Hertz, and the track is called Stingray. Now, it's a drum and bass track, so it's not going to appeal to everybody, but bear in mind, this is more about talking about what we're doing, getting Pete's genuine reaction on what it is that we're doing and what he's hearing and how we're working with the track in Dolby Atmos. The reason I wanted to do a fly on the wall kind of watching what we're doing is because there's a lot to take in the sense of what we actually are talking about, and I wanted to show you his genuine reaction to certain things moving around the room and moving things. So let's jump in and start with the mastering session. So what we have is, what's this song called? Stingray?
Yeah, Stingray.
Stingray. Nice little drum and bass track. And we're going to take it from a stereo mix stems, turn it into Atmos, and get Pete's honest impressions of the transformation from stereo to Atmos.
Yeah, I'm really interested, to be fair. Like, I've not done any Atmos mixes of my music or Hertz music, so it's going to be like, you know, kind of the first of its kind, really. A kind of walkthrough of Dolby Atmos mix of drum and bass. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, mate. So, go on then. What do you want to do?
Let's hope it's an eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
So what we'll do, first of all, is basically position everything. So, drum and bass. Drums up front.
Yeah.
The bass, I am presuming, is not going to be in mono. So the bass wise, we still need to keep that in left and right. It's not a case of going, right, let's have the bass right wide over here. The bass still needs to stay there. The brunt of the music, being the drums and the bass, still stay stereo. Still stay very much in the stereo field. If you got a sub bass, for instance, you can throw it down the center speaker. Gives it its own space down the center speaker. Generally speaking, drums, always keep them left and right speakers still, because you know what the aim is here is to make sure that the playback goes from stereo to Atmos and then still able to fold down into stereo as well. So let's just start positioning, and I'll show you on the Atmos renderer where we are positioning things. We can now move that bass 3 bang down the center, so you'll hear on this bass 3 that's now straight down the middle, and then you'll hear on bass 1.
I can hear the whip and everything.
Yeah.
It's still left. Yeah.
So now, if you play it, we can move that off the front wall and move it back a bit.
Kind of makes sense why you'd have to, or it'd be better to outsource your Atmos mixes to an Atmos mastering engineer, because imagine, like I've done, produced the record, created all these sounds from scratch, whether it's with synthesis and stuff, mixed the record, distorted things, got everything how I needed it to be, and imagine if my head the whole time I'm producing a record thinking, I'm going to mix this in Dolby Atmos as well.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever finish a record. It'd be a minefield, because you'd be, you know, you're always second guessing when you're producing what you're going to do production wise or mix down wise. And imagine then, you know, me having to be like, do the Dolby Atmos mix myself. It's almost, it's another skill, and it's another job that needs to be handed over to someone else.
Yeah.
Like looking at this.
I mean, yeah, the thing is with Atmos is there's so many more possibilities of what you can actually do. Whereas stereo, you're just kind of confined to those speakers. Whereas you explore the room, and that's why I'm standing up. And when I mix or do Atmos, any Atmos work, I always stand up and work, because
so
I can
do
walk
some
around.
dancing and stuff.
Yeah. Especially in this track. So this is the upmix signal. So this is what's being upmixed into multiple speakers.
What do you mean by upmix?
So what upmix is it's upmixing a stereo file into multiple speakers.
So you're not keeping the stereo there
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
moment.
yeah. So at the moment, I've got the output on that bass muted. So
Okay.
all this is.
So you can still have the stereo field of the top basses, and then you can start introducing it
Yeah.
around you.
Rather than like some people will add like reverb that will kind of spill into the room. You don't want reverb on a bass. Like I could have that bass, for instance, if
I kind of get the way that you approaching this. You're kind of keeping your stereo field, so everything sounds nice and solid, like we want it, like especially in a club environment. But then you can start to paint a picture
exactly
with
yeah
your choices around using the same sounds.
yeah
Spreading it around the speakers.
yeah.
Which in my head you
So,
think, well, why is not everything not phasing? But obviously that's not how it works.
but yeah, and that's why you have the always monitor back. If you look on the Trinov, I can switch to binaural, so I can monitor back in binaural as well. So I'm monitoring then the playback of the binaural audio as well. So and that's a whole nother thing to explain, because a lot of people will think you can only use binaural audio in headphones, but in reality, if you work correctly and work with the renderer properly, with the how to turn certain sounds off, mid, near, far, so you can basically make them sound like they're near, mid, far. If you set it up correctly and you constantly monitor it, and you can make perfect playback into stereo, and I'll show you that afterwards. But yeah, there's a lot of confusion with a lot of big engineers will say you can only use headphones for binaural when it's not true. So yeah, I'll show that in a little bit. But so in terms of this, we've got that bass, and then I'll bleed in some upmix. So you'll hear the bass. The bass is currently, if we play this bass. So that's basically in those side speakers, but it's still very much up the front. So what we're going to do now is introduce some upmix into it, and it's basically going to take that, what it basically does is it keeps the stereo image here exactly where it was, so nothing changes here. What it's doing is it's just introducing sound around the room.
Yeah, that's great, because the thing with Atmos, I was kind of worried that you'd end up with like, your snare drum there, or I know you've explained it's not how it works, but I've heard some mixes, and I'm thinking, why have you done that? Because it's just I don't know what I'm listening to. It can be so distracting.
Often the reason for that is because the people mixing it aren't mixing it in an Atmos room, because there's no way you'd put a sound at the back of the room and then think, yeah, that sounds great, because it doesn't. It never sounds great when a snare drum or drums on the back of the room.
Or a vocal.
Yeah. It's like a lead vocals, like they sound great from the front. You can bring them forward a little bit.
I suppose you've got to think about how the real world environment works.
Exactly.
When you speak to someone, you don't speak to them in the corner of the room. You face each other.
Yeah.
And that's the same with the sensors sort of image.
And you'll find with people that work in headphones on Atmos, you can't get that sense. It might sound great in headphones at the back of the room, but you can't get that sense of actually how it sounds. So there's so
much to learn.
There is. It's like learning to mix again in certain ways. The mixing is still the mixing aspect of it is still the same, in the sense that you're still working with stereo stems, for instance. It's just how the playback is. And the important thing is the playback can sound amazing in here, but there's no point if the playback then has to sound amazing going down into two speakers as well. And then that's when you get that great translation from an Atmos studio to everyone else's conventional systems that they're using, where they're listening on stereo speakers or headphones. So it's important to... There's a lot to look at and a lot to kind of constantly keep in mind. So if I say, I'll show you with the bass with the tops and the lows, and then I'll introduce some upmix. You'll hear it go all around the room. That's basically with it in, and then I'll switch it off. Now it's subtle, but it keeps everything intact. And I've got a kind of a way of setting this up in regards to the actual upmix. A lot of people will keep the upmix onto the center speakers and the on the left and right speakers. The best thing to do is mute those speakers, because you want to keep everything intact where it is there, and then all you want to hear is what's being added around behind you.
Oh, so you can then build your...
Yeah. So you're adding to it rather than adding additional content to those speakers. So let's move that bass. Let's see where that bass sounds nice. What I'll do is I'll quickly fold it down into stereo, so you can see the difference of.
This is mad. It's also it's making the tune sound way more like interesting.
Yeah, it's alive.
Yeah, I'm just like
realistic.
I know what stereo set of speakers
and the thing
sound
is,
like.
The thing is, yeah, exactly. But the thing is as well is at the moment we're working with a drum stem. Yeah. If you've got the drums, you've got the kick, the snare, the hi-hats. You can put the kicks, for instance, in the left and right speakers. The snare can be a little bit higher.
Oh, wow.
The cymbals can go here. The hi-hats can go here. So you get this
really go in.
Yeah, you get this soundscape around the front of the of the front of the room, rather than the drums at the moment just being constantly just in that left and right speaker. But yeah,
that's amazing.
Let's I'll tell you what. Let's play.
I think the lead is really important. It's like that's the main driving part of the record.
Well, the lead, the good thing with the lead, let's just play the leads here. So like a lead like that, and you'll already get a sense of where it should sit in the room. Bring it back, lift it there. So if it's there, it's kind of like this, it'll engulf the room.
Mm.
And again, with the lead, if I introduce some of the upmixing into it, you'll hear how it just opens up in the room.
A bit like when you, I don't know, in a stereo mix when you add something like
a widener or something.
Yeah, and you know you turn it on and off, as long as you're not just going crazy and just you miss it when it's gone.
Yeah.
You know.
So let's position the lead and position the lead. I'm thinking with the lead, we'll play around with it, but I'm thinking somewhere around here, or maybe around here, just so it keeps some focus onto the front. That's where I'm thinking.
Yeah, it sounds great. You really notice if you're a bit closer to one of these speakers, you really notice it, don't you? So it's really important, like how precise this room is.
The Trinov sweet spot is like literally here, and when you walk out of it, there's imperfections with the Trinov once you move out of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
But the thing with when I'm working on my own is it's literally standing like that.
Apart from when you're dancing.
Yeah. Just have to remember to stand in the sweet spot. I mean, the sweet spot's probably about that big, and as long as you're standing in, and that's why I've got all the different Trinov settings. Like sitting position is for when the desk is down, and you'll notice if I play this how much different it is when I switch to sitting in terms of the position. Thing is if your head's down here and the desk is down, it's perfect.
That sounds completely different.
Yeah.
You know, I know people
So that's
won't be able to tell that, but it's completely different.
But that's why it's important to have the sitting and standing position, because if I'm sitting down, I need to be in the sitting Trinov position, because then the sweet spot's here and it doesn't take into account that the desk is raised. And then in the standing position, the desk is raised, so there's slightly different reflections in terms of the desk making those different reflections. And obviously my head's up here, so my head's closer to the speakers up the top.
So why don't you like Trinov?
I love Trinov. I won't say a bad word about them.
Yeah, well, yeah.
The Trinov's something special.
Well, you made me buy one.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But listen. Just while we're talking on Trinov, is for your own kind of demonstration, is listen to my system with the Trinov off and on.
Yeah, go for it. That was a complete mess. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, you might get used to it, but once you've heard the Trinov on, then you turn it off, like, the bass just become completely flabby, and it sounded a bit like you'd added Sonar Works. It just become a bit smeared, and...
Well, the difference is how different do you think you would mix with that off compared to with it on? You would just be guessing the whole time. You'd have to have a binaural or whatever you call it, Dolby Atmos car to go and test your mixes in. You know, like old school. Yeah, it's it's very, very important.
It's insane.
I'll tell you what. Let's add the guitar in now.
Yeah.
Just because then what I can do is that's the meat and potatoes of what's in the track. That's basically your bass, your leads, your drums, and then the guitars in there. And then what we can do is reference to the stereo file. So then we can kind of go, right, Atmos stereo, and you'll see your own kind of personal impression of how Atmos sounds in comparison to the stereo file, because it blows me away every time. It makes music so much more enjoyable, especially in a room like this. In an ideal world, everyone would have a studio that's got.
I was about to say, in a studio, it probably costs £500,000. It sounds great.
So yeah, let's add that. The guitar is. See, the guitar is something that if we look at all the different instruments that are in this, the guitar's something that's going to be able to sit away from the bass, that lead.
Yeah, I mean, it's more traditional when we pan guitars. So I suppose you can have more options with it in the Atmos sense as well.
So the guitar on this track, it would probably be best off, because there's nothing else, because we haven't got a massive amount of stems. It would be best off pushing it further to the back of the room.
Yeah, I never liked guitars anyway.
Right, let's see where it sounds best. What I'll also give it is a little bit of upmixing as well to fill it out the room. I mean, things that you can do with it is if you listen to it with a little bit of reverb added into it as well. I'll introduce some reverb.
Like a cave or something?
Yeah.
Rather than just a synthetic reverb. Sounded real.
When you've got an original track that's originally mixed and already has a master, adding things like reverb in the mastering, it's not always ideal, because obviously it needs to stay very much similar or the same as what it originally was. You can't deviate away from it too much. So in this instance, let's not apply the reverb. But when you've got things like pads that already have that sprinkling of reverb, strings for instance, that just benefit from having more reverb applied to them, then those sorts of situations it's beneficial to add. Something like a guitar like this, we'd be better off applying a little bit of upmix just to get it into multiple speakers.
Yeah, I like upmix.
What I want to do now is just show you the kind of full mix, and and we'll show it in Atmos. And then what I'll do is I'll just jump to your the stereo mix, the pre-master of the stereo, just to kind of go Atmos stereo.
My response to that is the stereo mix sounds like utter shit. That's just it. It just, to me, and I mixed that and mastered it, it just sounds flat.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I do like the fact that the drums are a bit more up front, but that could be tweaked in this mix. Yeah. It just sounds lifeless now.
Yeah, see what's interesting is what I can do is if I now switch it to binaural, what I can do now is show you what the Atmos sounds like summed down into 2 speakers.
Oh, amazing.
So this is basically what people at home watching it on YouTube, for instance, are actually hearing. They're hearing what is the binaural render coming back off the renderer.
As if it's just...
Can you imagine? We're just switched now between the stereo master and the Atmos one. And then what I can do is I can actually rebalance the Atmos master so that it sounds as much alike to the stereo master.
Yeah.
That one we're listening to now, that's the Atmos.
Okay.
Folded down to stereo. Yeah. And then when that one's active, that's the master. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, food.
That's our food.
Right. That sounds much better.
Yeah, and then we can rebalance that mix to...
Alexa, put fans on, Studio 2.
I couldn't find any device with that name.
Oh, yes,
Which one do you want?
Alexa, put fans on in Studio 2.
I couldn't
Studio
find
B.
anything with that name. Please go to the Alexa app to change this.
Alexa, Studio Fans, Studio B.
Good afternoon, Nick. Sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Alexa, turn on Studio B fans.
Yeah, I was calling it Studio 2.
Okay.
And then the other things you can do is in regards to the... I'll bring this over so people can see. You can change between off, near, mid and far. And if you listen to this sort of sound, we're listening to it now as a binaural playback. So you'll hear all this binaural information. Now this is where a lot of people get it wrong, is they don't adjust this binaural information for playback in speakers as well. So monitoring on the speakers, you can hear now as I flick through these how the sound changes. So we can see quickly where this sound is positioned. So it's slightly back and raised up off the floor. So it's kind of like here. Then when I change the binaural information, you'll see when it's off it sounds different, and near, far, and you'll get a sense of it actually moving nearer, further and far away from you. Now the thing with it is, some sounds work really well, some sounds not so well. So some sounds, like this sound, I actually don't like the binaural information, so I can leave it off. So if we listen, like I'll flick between like off and mid, and you'll see the difference in sound. You'll hear like in the top end, it will sound slightly phasey, and that's what you want to avoid, and that ensures you get a good playback in stereo speakers.
Feels like the top end's becoming a bit, like you said, phasey.
Yeah.
It's phasing.
So like certain sounds, it's important to ensure that certain sounds go to off. So if we look at like those guitars, for instance, these will most probably really benefit from it in the sense that they'll sound a lot more, a lot wider, a lot more sort of immersive, and so. Now, if I play that in the grand scheme of the whole mix, I'll switch it from off to mid, and you'll hear those guitars will kind of almost wrap around the music a bit more.
Yep.
See how you get that tiny sense of it wrapping around a little bit more. So that's where you get the benefits of using Atmos.
So with this binaural renderer that you're on, does this affect the sound of the Atmos mix you've done previously?
No.
Right.
So that won't affect the sound of the Atmos mix. Now this is where I'm talking about people don't monitor in binaural. They don't monitor the binaural playback. So you can get a mix sounding brilliant in Atmos, but the majority of people are listening to it in headphones. So you have to monitor that binaural playback is correct, because the last thing you want to do is set everything to mid, and then your synth, for instance, there would sounds all wispy and kind of phasey. And this is the problem you have with a lot of Atmos engineers, is they're not taking that into account. They're releasing songs, are getting released and they sound rubbish because they're not taking any of this sort of information into account. So that doesn't actually affect how it sounds in Atmos. You'll see if I play the let's say I'll play that synth sound. What is it? This one. If I play that in Atmos, so I'll play that back, and then I'll switch to mid. You'll hear no difference in Atmos. There's no change, but people at home will have heard a change. So you won't have heard a change because you're listening to Atmos. But whereas I changed that.
So essentially you do two mixes then? You do the Atmos and the binaural is the sort of byproduct of the Atmos.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily so much two mixes. It's more one mix with you taking into account how it sounds through another playback, being binaural. How it sounds, you want it to sound great in Atmos but also sound great in binaural, and if anything you kind of want it to sound as best it possibly can in binaural, because that's the kind of simulation of what the majority of people are going to be how they're going to be hearing it.
Okay, amazing.
The only people that are going to hear it in full Atmos are people with full Atmos systems who are playing it back in Atmos, and which is probably, I'd say, 1%. The majority of people have got Apple AirPods and they're listening to it back through Apple and things like that, and streaming it back over headphones. So they benefit from what you're hearing, in the sense of when we're basically switching from that being the stereo master to us listening to the binaural playback here. So it's like the difference is this. So that's kind of the difference between someone who's listening on headphones, just kind of flicking Atmos on and off. That's that difference if they were doing that on Apple.
Little incidentals, you can have fun with them, I suppose.
Yeah. So you could pan these around the room a little bit if you wanted to. What we'll do is, based on where everything else is sitting on the renderer, for instance, we'll have a look at where best to sit it in the space. So if we look. That's the kind of position that I like.
Is that more towards the front?
Yeah, so that's
what I was thinking.
That's sitting about there, because
it's distracting otherwise.
Yeah, that's the thing, is sometimes you can get carried away with Atmos. Like on day one of working in Atmos, you go, right, I want to put stuff over there, I want this there, and everything's everywhere. And then after a few years of working in it, it's kind of like, right, well, where is actually best for this sound? And you get a natural instinct of where sound should kind of position. You almost see it as like it is on there. You can see balls in the room of where the objects are.
You know, it reminds me of this, like when mono, not that I was around then, went to stereo, and then you got that Beatles album, or one of them, where they cut the drums hard pan left, and something like that. They were like, wow, we got two speakers to play with. So obviously they've gone and done that, which in this day and age is just crazy. But it's similar to what I'd imagine if you got an Atmos room, you'd be like doing the similar sort of thing. You'd be like, wow, I've got all these speakers, let's pan them everywhere.
I remember like when I first started mixing in Atmos, I'd automate sweeps and risers to kind of go like it was like an aeroplane coming down from behind you and things like that. And then what I quickly realised was that the playback, when it would then get played back in a kind of in headphones, is it sounded weird, like going, and then it would phase, and there would be because of the movement, it just wasn't right. But yeah, the positioning of the sound and the binaural settings of the sound all play a major part in how it actually plays back and actually sounds.
So with positioning, it's down to your ears, really.
Yeah.
Where you want to place things, or where's the best place to play them from experience.
Yeah.
Place them from your experience.
Basically, yeah. That's why you'd send it off to a Atmos mastering engineer or mixing engineer, because when the difference of what you may do, even if you had your own Atmos set up, the difference of where you would position it might not be where's best to actually position it. Because that's what's so beneficial about having like a 100% accurate room. There's no room for mistakes. There's no, like, it sounds, the way it sounds is how it's going to sound.
Yeah, and then it will translate properly.
Yeah. So let's start adding. Let's add that in and make sure that sound is at the right volume. So these are something where you could possibly add the Atmos reverb into it, depending on the sound. The thing with this sort of sound is it's still quite low in terms of the frequencies, so you kind of don't want to put them at the back of the room, because low frequencies at the back of the room they sound a bit weird. So you can kind of move them more to the front. There's also another thing I'll show you, is you can open the size of a sound up. Let me just quickly show you that, because like on this lead, for instance, we could solo this lead. and yeah, I can basically, here I can open the size of it up, so you'll see here, if I play the lead, it basically just gets bigger, fills out more of the speakers, so it's kind of like it's becoming bigger in,
like
the room.
like a stereo expander, but an Atmos expander.
Yeah. So it's basically, here's the object. We're going to spill you into more of the room, but that's something I like to do afterwards. Is play around with the size of the room, and mainly that's because I like to monitor it once the kind of mix is finished and the kind of positioning is finished, because then I want to monitor how it sounds in binaural as well, because the more you open the space of a room up, the louder the sound gets in a stereo speaker. So that's another one that you've got to monitor, what it sounds like in Atmos versus what it sounds like in coming out of a stereo speaker or headphones, and just kind of get a happy medium between the two, so it sounds great in Atmos, sounds great on through in stereo. Right, yeah, this sound kind of sits on its own. So this is very much something that is on its own. It's got a little bit of leads here with it, but this sound here, it's basically a case of really kind of just making it a very much a central point around here. I would vision it. What I will do with this sound is I will open up the size of it, because it sits on its own. I don't want it to just sit in a certain position. I want to open the size up and make it fill the room a bit more.
Well, the nature of the sound is supposed to be like a drone, like an atmospheric sound. It's not really an instrument. It's not necessarily about notes or anything. So what you're doing is correct, really. That's how it should be treated. And that has the verb. Yeah, I can hear the verb.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
It definitely, the verb works a lot better on this than it does the guitars.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying before about the reverb, is that when you've got like strings and pads, it works really well. But something like a guitar it's very much down to the client's kind of taste. It's like, do I like that? Do I want that sort? Do I want like an atmospheric kind of reverb on a guitar, or do I not? And I'm not really the one that should be making that sort of call. It's kind of like, is that what you want, or is that what was intended? Often when if you've got a sound that already has a reverb in the stem,
you're going to think, I could put a bit of reverb on this.
So you could add a little bit that kind of doesn't add to the reverb that's already in there, but it then just adds it to around the room, so you've got that additional reverb in the room, and that sounds good a lot of the time.
So do you take mixes from the start, mix the record, Atmos the record, what's the other one, the renderer, what's that called, binaural? That's
the binaural,
binaural, and master it? You do all that service?
So you take do the mix, you do the mix, you get all the positioning done in Dolby Atmos, that renders out a stereo mix as well as a Dolby Atmos mix. Then you've got the Dolby Atmos master. Then you've also got the one that a lot of people haven't kind of worked out yet that they can do, is stereo master of the binaural playback. If you can get the binaural playback to sound perfect, then you can master that through the analog equipment, and you get what you then end up with is a stereo master that sounds massive, and it's unparalleled to what can be achieved if you mix in stereo and then master the stereo master.
So you work hard to get a finished product.
You got there's a lot you have to know, and it's stuff that over a period of time you will learn, and a
lot of people struggle with stereo mixing, even myself, because we're in drum and bass, we're trying to achieve these sonic, massive mixes, and it can be really hard.
Yeah.
So for you to take someone's mix it, and do all these other mixes and other processes and all these other ways of finishing it, and then deliver it, it's a massive skill.
Well, that's the thing, is those things, tools like this Avid S4, they're very expensive, but they make doing all of that really simple.
I'm watching you. Like, I was thinking, like, if I had a mouse, I'd be like, it's just take forever. But the way you'll be able to solo this, move this there, do this, that would take, say, 10 minutes on a mouse, and you can do it in seconds. Yeah, and that's why this as a console is worth its weight in gold, because it saves me so much time. And it's feel based as well. You can feel where you're placing stuff rather than looking. Yeah, that's, you could turn the screens off almost. And mix in Atmos.
Well, you can if you really want to. You can move away from the mouse and keyboard altogether, put them over there, and just use the console, and not actually have to physically touch the mouse and keyboard. You can do everything that you want to do off the console. Certain tasks are just easier to do on the mouse and keyboard, like scrolling up and down. But then you've got your jog wheel to zoom in and out. And then this section's all my sends, so that's my LFE send, my reverb send, my remic send, my upmix send is all on sends. And then if I need to pan, they're all my panning. If I need to use a plugin, I can just open a plugin like that, and then I've got all my plugin control.
Wow,
it's it's really quite handy.
Oh, and your plugins load mapped.
Yeah. So they're all mapped, everything's mapped, ready to go. Yeah, it's really beneficial to have. Right, so let's quickly just listen to this section running from here into the next section, which will just play that drone section. It's a good tune, this.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, these I presume are effects risers type sounds. So these always sound great. Panning them kind of back and up to the ceiling, and it kind of engulf the top of the ceiling more.
Sounds great.
And what you can do really well with this is open the size up with it. So basically this sounds great kind of around the middle of the room, up to the ceiling, just a touch off the ceiling, and then opening up some of the size just gives it a bigger kind of fills the top of the ceiling a lot more. So yeah, have a listen to that riser there. It's all kind of around here, and then it's where I've opened the size up, so you can see it on here. And that's generally the position that I like to use for things like effects like that, because it basically just positions it just above your head here, and then just kind of puts a circle around your head there, like a big orb.
You're doing one of your dances?
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's the positioning done. What we'll do is, outside of the video, we'll fine tune what we want to do with it. But that is basically the positioning done. So I'll play it from here. You can have a listen in Atmos. But yeah, so here's a really interesting one. Play this back. What I'm going to do is, at the moment, is playing back in Atmos, so it's coming out of every speaker. Then I'm going to sum it straight down into binaural coming out of these two speakers, and you'll hear it then in stereo. And then you'll hear how well the fold down is to stereo.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I can tell straight away is it still feels like there's stuff up here.
Yeah.
Maybe not as obvious, well, definitely not as obvious, but there's still stuff up here. That's why I'm doing a dance. That's why I look round, because I was like, are these speakers on? But then you turn and there's obviously not.
Yeah, and there's just coming out of there.
So it does create this 3D image.
Yeah.
Maybe not 3D, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not really
But
good
then
at...
bearing in mind that it is physically coming out of two speakers. You Peter Crouch.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind it is physically just coming out of two speakers. It's
amazing.
Not coming out of other speakers. So things like that. It's
I actually really like the mix down to the binaural.
Yeah.
I think that really translates a lot better than I thought it would. Because I've heard people say that, oh, you know, the fold down, if that's what you call it, is amazing. I'm like, how can it be?
Yeah.
But it sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, that's the difference. I mean, the direct comparison is comparing, even though that's mastered, comparing the original master compared to the binaural fold down is basically put it into binaural.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that again. But...
No.
My original mix and master just sounds boxy. It now sounds like it was mixed on NS10s, and it also it's lost all the width. All of a sudden, it just goes into this kind of like flat center image mono mix, even though it wasn't mixed like that.
No.
It's quite a wide stereo mix.
But bear in mind as well is we've touched no EQ.
Yeah, that's
no
this is the
compression,
confusing part of it.
no dynamics. All we've done is positioned each sound in its own space, which then gets summed down into this.
So how does it introduce all this extra detail? What is it? Is it like magic or something? 'Cause it sounds so much more detailed than alive.
There's little gremlins down there that
Where?
don't feed them after midnight. Yeah, Nick's under there just.
I'm just doing stuff. Basically, it's just plugging in analog gear in and out really quickly.
Dear. Yeah, Dick, come out now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is that sort of sense of magic.
It is magic. I mean, I've watched you work on it, and you need to know exactly what you're doing. You know, you can't just.
You could get it way wrong. You could get this totally wrong, to the point where that playback in binaural doesn't sound as good as it does. There's reasons behind and certain things that I haven't necessarily shown in the video that are the ways that I achieve what I achieve.
But the secret stuff.
Yeah, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, the stuff that you got to pay for.
So there's and that's the kind of what ends up happening is it is that separation. Everybody at home can hear that difference between that original master compared to how it's sounding now. And then the great thing now is how good that sounds now playing back in stereo. We can now master that for all the analog gear.
Yeah, this is the thing to me, right? So I'd say this, right? Standing in this room, hearing a mix in Atmos is absolutely incredible, without a doubt. However, when it folds to binaural, it sounds way better than my stereo master. And that is the key. I mean, like, I'm a producer that I just want to keep getting my levels higher and higher and higher, and to be the sort of, like, you know, the best they can be, better than everyone else, basically. And I believe this binaural mix has taken my track, which is already quite a well-produced record, and taking it to the next level, which I couldn't achieve doing it myself or just doing it in stereo. And that's what I'm really shocked about, because not everyone's got an Atmos room, so you can't experience it, but everyone could listen to my master and then the binaural master mix, and you can tell there's a massive difference and there's an improvement in quality. And as Paul was saying, there's no EQ, there's no nothing really been added apart from placement and a tiny bit of reverb from what I gather. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically. The things that we've done is we've positioned the objects in the Atmos space. We've added some tiny amounts of kind of spatial reverb. We've used the upmix, and this is where it gets it's kind of really nice image when you compare that stereo master to the binaural one. Is a lot of it is to do with the upmix, and some of what I was doing with the upmix I will edit out, so I haven't shown all of that, and that's because it is very much a secret process for me and my service only, and I don't particularly want everyone else using my methods of getting a track to sound.
Well, I mean, it's a bit like me when I produce. I don't want to give away all my tips and
No,
tricks.
I'll give away a lot.
We're all in competition with
Yeah,
each other,
of
whether
course.
it's business wise or just artist wise. And you're an artist just
Yeah.
like me. You know, there's mastering engineers, mix engineers. We're all going head to head, even though we pretend to be friends. You know, so you've got you know, and this is what separates you from other mix
Exactly,
or mastering engineers. You have your flavour, your skill, something you've developed,
Yeah.
and you know, and you've got to keep that for a while, and then you can tell everyone when you've found something new.
yeah. That's it. Yeah. That is where we're at the moment, sounding brilliant. We've got our spacing right. We've got our general sound right. There's a couple of things that I'll do now with you that I won't do on camera because I don't want those certain things to be shown. And then we'll print off the full master.
So it's basically it's like from start to finish, really.
The
whole mix.
The only thing that I haven't done here with you is this is more Atmos mastering, whereas we haven't done the Atmos mixing as such, which is doing all the EQing, the processing, the additional stuff that's more in the stereo domain. That then we've just gone straight to the.
So would there be a slightly different process of mixing the track from scratch for it to be done, then converted into Atmos? Would you say if you had more individual stems, like you were saying at the beginning, you'd be able to do more with it and make different
So
decisions?
Yeah, I mean, if we had, like, let's say even just like the
kick snare,
drum,
percussion,
if the kick drum was isolated, I would maybe, instead of the kick drum being there with the rest of the drums, I'd maybe move it in a touch, and then I'd process it slightly different, get it a bit more punchier and stuff like that. Same with the snare drum, keep the snare drum quite wide, but maybe lifting it off the floor a little bit. Percussion, bringing them a bit wider, and it just creates more of a soundscape around the front of the room.
Wow, so you can really go in with this.
Yeah. Because at the moment the drums are left and right; they're basically there, and there'll be not a great deal of difference between the drums in stereo.
I suppose the way I'm thinking of it now is, if that's your mix in front of us, you can't just take the tops and raise them up, because what goes in the middle?
Yeah.
You can't just pan it out.
Yeah.
You know, you can't stretch it up, because you just end up with either some sort of algorithm doing a smear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're raising the drums up, because you want to kick, you need them separate.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the thing what you can
unless Isotope come up with their plugin that does it.
Yeah, I mean the Isotope things like Ozone 11 with their separation. I mean that is a brilliant tool for in the stereo world. Hopefully they'll start bringing out some bits that are Atmos enabled, and you can really kind of use them in Atmos. I'm not sure what it would be yet, but yeah, there's plenty of room for Atmos to improve. With plugins developed specifically for Atmos, but yeah, I mean that's
absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for showing me. Like, it's bloody hot in here, I'll tell you that. His electric bills are mental. He's telling me they're not, but I don't believe him. He told me what it was, and I reckon he took a 0 off it.
Right. What we do now is I finish this Atmos master, and then I'll print the binaural, and we'll sit down and we'll cook the room a bit more with the analog gear
amazing.
But in the meantime, I'm going to turn the cameras off, because then I can turn all the fans on.
Yeah, wicked.